Here's the recording of pages 232 to 237. We're starting with the land of milk and honey. The Israelites believed that Canaan was the land God had promised them. They often called it the Promised Land. To them, it was a land of milk and honey, where life would be good. Still, Canaan turned out not to be an empty land just waiting for new settlers. Many people already lived there, and the Hebrews knew they would have to fight for it. According to the Torah, Moses died before the Israelites entered Canaan, and the new leader named Joshua took charge. Joshua was very different from Moses. He had a different job to do. For now, the Hebrews needed a brave soldier and general to lead them. Looking back on their history, they remembered Egypt and their escape from the Pharaoh's army. They believed their God had been stronger than the soldiers of the Pharaoh. Now they believed their God would help them conquer new enemies, that he would lead them into battle and help them defeat the people who did not believe in him. Joshua led the Israelites in their conquest of Canaan. And again, remember, Israelites is the same word for the Hebrews. They marched to the walled city of Jericho, besieged the city, and prayed. The Torah says when Joshua blew his horn, the walls of Jericho collapsed, and the Israelites won the city. In the next 2 centuries, the Israelites won all of Canaan. The Israelites choose a king. In the 11th century BC, so it's like 1100 BC, between 11 and 1000 BC. Hebrews faced a new and serious danger. A powerful nomadic people called the Philistines came from across the Mediterranean Sea and settled on the coast. Soon they were moving inland and threatening Canaan, the region the Hebrews considered their promised land. The Israelites needed protection against the fierce Philistines, the Torah says, and some suggested that the tribes join under one king. A single king, they argued, could organize and govern all the Hebrew tribes, making them stronger against the Philistine threat. Other Hebrews countered that such a move would be wrong. They thought God himself rules us. We do not need a king. Finally, however, the Israelites decided to unite under one ruler. They were eager to choose one who would please God. They took their ideas of government from their religion. They saw a good government as one that obeyed God's laws. This was especially important if a king was at the head of the government. They believed their king must obey all of God's laws, for if he didn't, God would punish him and the whole nation too. The most important thing to the Hebrews was to have a good and just king. They chose a young man named Saul. At first, Saul seemed to be a good choice, but then quarrels broke out. And then what is it about the Philistine? What a Philistine. The Philistines were a sea people who in time of turmoil fled the Aegean Sea and settled on the coast of Canaan. They challenged the Israelites for possession of Canaan. The Philistines were not great artists or poets, but they knew how to smelt iron and make excellent weapons. Nowadays, if someone is called a Philistine, it's meant as an insult. It means that person has no appreciation of the arts or is uncultured. Okay, the war with the Philistines went badly. The kingdom was falling apart. The Israelites believed that Saul must have angered God in some way. David. If the Israelites had continued to quarrel among themselves, the Philistines probably would have conquered them. But Saul was killed in battle around the year 1000 BC, and a new leader stepped forward to replace him. The Israelites' second king was named David. David was already a popular hero, well known for his bravery and devotion to God. Hebrew scriptures say that as a young man, he had killed a huge Philistine warrior called Goliath. The fight was won whose fame lives to this day. As the Torah tells the story, young David, armed with only a sling, his courage and his faith in God, hurled a stone at the towering Goliath and struck him dead. In later wars against the Philistines, David's soldiers also fought bravely. Under David, the Israelites drove back the Philistines. The Hebrew army captured the city of Jerusalem, and David made it the capital of his kingdom. The Israelites called Jerusalem the city of David. On the map on page 235, locate Jerusalem. Okay, 235 is right over here. And where is Jerusalem? Right there. Okay. And let's go back here. Right here, Hebrew scriptures say that the young shepherd boy David killed the Philistine giant Goliath with a slingshot. Okay, let's go back here. David ruled for about 40 years, and under his reign, Israel became a wealthier and stronger kingdom that remained united against its enemies. A man who loved music, David wrote many psalms or hymns to God, and he tried to obey God's law. Though he sometimes failed, the Hebrews considered him a great king. They believed that God must be with him. When David became an old man, he gave up the throne, and his son Solomon became king. Famous for his wisdom, Solomon constructed a great temple and palace in Jerusalem. Solomon ruled with skill and diplomacy, working to keep peace, dispense justice, and encourage trade with other peoples. He is said to have written many songs and proverbs that eventually found their way into the Torah, where the Torah is the Jewish holy book. The Israelites came to believe that the temple that Solomon built in Jerusalem was the only temple they could have. They had only one God, so they could have only one temple, and there they offered sacrifices of animals, fruit, or grain to honor God. The temple in Jerusalem became the center of Hebrew worship. The fall of Jerusalem. Solomon's reign was not without its troubles. The Hebrew tribes still sometimes quarreled with each other, and after Solomon's death around 930 BC, the kingdom split in two. The tribes in the south formed the kingdom of Judah. The north became the kingdom of Israel. Okay, so here's Judah, and then here's Israel. And then here's a picture, arms outstretched toward the heavens. The Hebrew king Solomon dedicates his temple to God. Okay, the Hebrews continued to fight with surrounding tribes. Both Judah and Israel managed to fend off their enemies, yet they had many other problems to worry about. The old polytheistic beliefs of the Canaanites still appealed to some Hebrews. They went on worshiping many gods, and the Hebrew kings did not always stop them. In fact, some of the kings themselves worshiped different gods. Time and again, prophets warned the Hebrews to return to one God or face his punishment. They predicted that both Israel and Judah would fall apart, and that the Hebrews would be driven out of their land, killed, or made into slaves in return for breaking God's law. Around the year 720 BC, the first part of their prophecy seemed to come true. The Assyrians destroyed the kingdom of Israel, killing and scattering its people. More than 100 years later, the kingdom of Judah fell to the armies of Babylon and their warrior king Nebuchadnezzar. You may recall Nebuchadnezzar as the king who built the Hanging Gardens. According to Hebrew scripture, Nebuchadnezzar also attacked Jerusalem twice. He first seized it in 597 BC, forcing more than 10,000 of Jerusalem's citizens into exile in Babylon. The second book of Kings records the event, and he carried away all Jerusalem and all the princes and all the mighty men of valor. None remained, save the poorest sort of the people of the land. Nebuchadnezzar took his captives to Babylon, hoping to discourage future defiance in Israel. But it didn't work. Only a decade later, the remaining Hebrews in Jerusalem rebelled. Nebuchadnezzar was furious. He sent his army against the city again. He meant to take care of this trouble spot once and for all. After a long siege, Jerusalem fell. The Babylonians plundered the city. What they couldn't carry off, they put to torch. Nebuchadnezzar's soldiers destroyed the city's great temple, built by King Solomon himself. They led the rest of the Israelites to Babylon as slaves. On the map on page 214 in chapter 6, locate Babylon. So if we go to page 214, okay, remember there's Canaan, there's Jerusalem, and there's Babylon. All right, that's the end of the reading for pages 232 to 237.